Welcome to Kicking Ass and Taking Names, the Business Owners Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith Esquire. Join us on this podcast journey as we help you break free from the grind and get your business to work for you. We will delve into impactful conversations with business owners, corporate leaders, professional service providers, and industry innovators that will provide you with insights and actionable strategies that will transform your entrepreneurial path, boost your success, and put you in control of your business journey so you can kick ass and take names. Welcome to episode 11 of Kicking Ass and Taking Names with Marlon Griffith Esquire. The title of this episode is Falling Out of a Tree: Lessons in Leadership from a Healthcare Innovator. A conversation with Dr. George V. Russell. I first met George over 35 years ago as a freshman on Denison University campus. He was a senior. I was fresh with my high top fade. Yes, I had a high top fade. And George and I quickly became friends. He was the big brother, the mentor, and we've been friends ever since. And I am so happy that he agreed to give me or to share part of his very busy schedule so we can record this podcast and I can share these lessons and these words of wisdom from such an esteemed professional with my audience. So before we go into the podcast, let me read George's bio. Dr. George V. Russell is the chief of orthopedic trauma in the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine's Department of Orthopaedic Surgery and associate chief of UPMC's orthopedic service line. Russell also serves as an associate chief of surgical quality and executive vice chair of Pitt's Department of Orthopedic Surgery. UPMC Presbyterian and UPMC Mercy are level 1 trauma centers, treating more than 75,000 orthopedic trauma patients each year. In his current role, Russell drives the coordination of orthopedic trauma care across the UPMC network. Russell is one of the nation's leading orthopedic trauma surgeons and is the pioneer of the clamshell procedure, which is widely used to correct malunions or crooked bones. Dr. Russell has authored and co-authored more than 50 articles in peer-reviewed professional publications, multiple book chapters, and has presented both nationally and internationally on specialty care for orthopedic trauma and leadership. In 2013, Dr. Russell became the first Black orthopedic surgeon to serve as chairman of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And in 2021, became the CEO of the University Physicians. Dr. Russell received his bachelor's degree from the Denison University and his medical degree from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. He also holds an executive MBA from the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. My friend, George V. Russell. In our conversation, George and I talked about his experience in leadership. As you can tell, he's had quite a long career and held many management positions, leadership positions. And one of the things, that jumped out in our conversation, jumped out to me, is when he talked about his approach to leadership. And he called it the do nothing approach to leadership, which is a book that he first read and we introduced to him in business school by J. Keith Murnighan, which is titled Do Nothing, How to Stop Overmanaging and Become a Great Leader. George talked about that his philosophy in leadership is to build up people and empower his team. So basically, you empower your team to do what needs to be done, and your role is to eliminate bottlenecks, set the strategy, help guide your team, but leave it to your team to actually implement what needs to be done. You also will encourage your team. When you empower your team, you empower them by also making clear that since they are the ones on the front line, they have a say. Their opinions matter. So you encourage them to share with you the things that they think could improve whatever the processes are, the things that they think could help get to whatever the goal that you have set for your team. That allows you to step back from the minutia, allows you as a leader to continue to think about and focus on improving the processes and think about growing your business, right? As opposed to thinking about the day-to-day grind of your business. The other book that he spoke of regarding leadership was Good to Great, Why Companies Make the Leap and Others Don't, by Jim Collins. Again, two books I think are great reads for business owners or people who are just in leadership positions. The other theme that jumped out to me was when he said he prepares himself to be lucky. And what does that mean? How did I receive that? Well, as he stated, and you'll hear in the podcast, there's a lot of talented people out here, a lot of smart people, right? But you have to prepare yourself, develop yourself, so that when opportunity comes your way, you'll be in a position to take advantage of it. And some people call that being lucky. You know the situation. You go out with someone, you have a lunch, you go to an event, and a few days later, someone calls you with an opportunity. Or you may just be sitting at your desk and the opportunity comes from, as you believe, it comes from nowhere. But I challenge you on that. Opportunities are created, even when you don't know exactly what opportunity is being created for you. Because those opportunities created because you are preparing yourself to be lucky by developing yourself. Right? George, after 20 years of being an orthopedic surgeon, decided he wanted to go to business school because he was curious and interested in management. He liked the program. He went to business school, and while he still obviously went to an executive program, and within 3 months of graduating from Kellogg, he was offered the position of chair at the University of Mississippi. He, as he stated, that was not his goal when he went to business school. But clearly it happened because he prepared himself for that opportunity. So when it came, he was ready to accept it, ready to take advantage of it. Often as business owners, we only focus on things that we think provides a direct return on our investment, a tangible return on our investment. And what we must understand and must realize that when we develop ourselves, that return may not be as obvious today. It may not be a direct I give you $1, I get a product back. It may show itself at some point in your future when you least expect it because you've been preparing for it. The same thing with your business itself. When you prepare your business so that when that opportunity comes where you have multiple clients or a large or a larger request, if you're producing something, you have prepared your business because you've created the processes and you have your staff and organizationally and wise in place. So when that opportunity comes, you're able to say yes. Right? You're able to say yes today. Not let me get back to you. Right? So I think, we often overuse the word I got lucky. I'm just lucky. No, sir. No, ma'am. Luck is created because you put yourself in the place to be lucky. You put yourself in the place to take advantage of luck. And one of the final things, the final theme is show up. Dr. Russell George talks about showing up, being on time. I use that and parallels that to a business owner, to a business. I think of showing up as being consistent, creating a consistent product, creating a consistent strategy, consistent marketing, being consistent with your employees. Consistency. As many people have great ideas. They try it for a week. They try it for a month. Didn't quite work out the way they thought it was going to work out in that moment in time, so they abandon it and they move on. They stop showing up. But what about, again, when you are part of an organization? Again, not directly related to your bottom line. You're part of a charity that you're involved in. Maybe you're part of your school's, PTA. Again, not directly related to your bottom line. It's just as important in those situations to show up, be consistent. If you have a meeting, don't cancel it. Do not show up because, it's just a board, just a PTA. You don't know who is watching you in those situations. People form impressions about you based on how you deal with everything. Whether it's showing up for work, whether it's showing up for a business meeting, whether it's showing up for a nonprofit board, whether it's just showing up to the soccer game. Show up and continue to show up on time. Welcome to episode 11 of Kicking Ass and Taking Names with Marlon Griffith Esquire. I've been trying to get this good brother on my podcast since I started this process. Dr. George Russell. What's up, George?
What's going on, Marlon?
All right. So let me give y'all some little disclosures here. George and I, Dr. Russell and I, both went to Denison University. George was a senior when I was a freshman. Took me onto his wing when I was there. He's an orthopedic surgeon. I gotta read this, George, because you got some stuff behind you now. It's George V. Russell, MD, MBA, who's now at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. He is professor and chief orthopedic trauma, associate chief of surgical quality, and executive vice president of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. Did I get all that covered?
Yeah, we got it. It's pretty good.
All right. But most importantly, he's a fellow alum of Denison University in Granville, Ohio. And also you're on the board, I believe, right, George?
Yes, I am.
All right. And he's a native of Cincinnati, Ohio, but somehow he's making it happen in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's been hard to move to Pittsburgh, surrounded by all these Steelers fans. Especially, I'm a diehard Bengals fan, and they are horrible this year. And so the Steelers fans love to rub it in.
Oh, yes, they do. The black and gold, huh?
And even better, so the department covers the Steelers. So
Wow.
You can never escape.
I guess that's true. So George, just tell me. I remember when we were in school together, and I always remember you going to the biology labs. And like George is at the biology labs. Tell me why? How do you get interested in medicine?
So it's a long, long story. So I always, as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a doctor, even from my youngest childhood memories. And then as I got older, I sort of focused in on orthopedics. The first interaction with orthopedics, I fell out of a tree when I was about 4, and then I broke my elbow. Then I had a couple of ankle fractures.
Mm.
And then I had the fortune of meeting a Dr. Alvin Crawford, good brother from Cincinnati, who operated on me when I was probably 16 or so on my ankle. And from that interaction, I ultimately went to med school in Cincinnati, but then became sort of a mentee of Dr. Crawford's. And over the past 35 years or so, we have remained in contact on a very regular basis. And that's how it happened.
Wow. Wow. I remembered you on the lacrosse field your senior year. You played lacrosse, and I was surprised you didn't get any broken bones from that one season, because all you were
Well,
doing was running into people.
I wasn't good enough to get any broken bones. I wasn't fast enough or talented enough. I got a couple little, shoulder problems, but nothing long lasting. And then from there, I went to med school in Cincinnati, did my residency in Cincinnati, then did a trauma fellowship out in Seattle, Washington. And interestingly, from there, I was going to go back home to Cincinnati to practice, but it didn't work out. And I was scrambling around a little bit and ended up in Mobile, Alabama, which was the beginning of my tour through the South.
Yes, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get into that. So now as I said, we've known each other for over 30 years now. Been in each other's weddings and all of that good stuff. So we are good friends. And when I heard that you were moving to Alabama, we talked to all of our buddies like, what is George doing in Alabama? Then we said, yeah, George can make Alabama work. Right? So tell us about that experience in Alabama before you got to Mississippi.
Oh, so I was in that time. What I do for a living now is trauma surgery and particular parts of trauma, which would be hip socket fracture. There weren't a lot of jobs back when I was coming out. And when the job at home didn't work out, I was kind of scrambling around a little bit, looking for opportunities in academic medicine. And there was a connection that I had with some people from Mobile, Alabama, who were looking for somebody with the type of practice I was interested in. And although I had a lot of bias against the Deep South, coming from the Midwest, my parents went to segregated schools, all those kinds of things, I didn't have a positive view on Alabama. But when I just sort of looked at it on balance, I said, if you don't want to be guilty of the same sort of bias and things like that, you just got to go try it. So I went down there for 2 years, tried it out. It was a really good practice. It was a great introduction to academic medicine, which has always been sort of my passion since I finished training.
And in fact, fast forward, I believe one of your daughters ended up going to the University of Alabama.
Yeah. One of my daughters did go. My oldest went to the University of Alabama.
Yeah, that's right. But then after Alabama, you stayed in the South, ended up in Mississippi.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I was in Alabama for a couple of years, and I was looking for a new opportunity. I was looking for perhaps a larger university. And interestingly, for what I like to do, Jackson, Mississippi was a very busy center.
Yes.
So particularly what I like to do clinically is what we call acetabular fracture or hip socket fractures. And it's not like doing a total hip, which a lot of people do. It's a very esoteric part of trauma surgery, which it's a fairly rare injury, but to gain proficiency, you've got to do a lot of reps. In the Deep South, because there aren't so many trauma centers, so in such close proximity to one another, those injuries focus at the academic medical centers, and particularly in Mobile and then especially in Jackson. Jackson was, believe it or not, it was sort of it was a center of orthopedic trauma development, especially in the early years.
Mhm.
And so
And I think
I got recruited there, and I told the chairman, I said, I'm not coming till I meet some black people. So he made that happen for me, and it was probably the best professional move I could have made.
so. You sound like you went where opportunity led you.
Yeah, I went, I definitely went where opportunity led me, for sure. There were opportunities to go other places, but to do the what I like to do and manage the complex injuries, Jackson, Mississippi was a phenomenal place for that.
And in fact, I think one of your, and we'll get to this point, but like one of your noted specialties, because you are like nationally known, but one of your noted specialties is really obesity.
Yes.
And many may or may not know that obviously Mississippi is known. I guess it's not a positive thing necessarily, but it does have a high rate of obesity in the state of Mississippi.
Oh yeah. So Mississippi, currently, when I left, a third of the population would be considered sort of obese or morbidly obese, and it's projected by the year 2030, about 2/3 of the population will be obese and morbidly obese. So there's a big need for people who are interested in that line of work. So the reason it came of interest to us is in operating on folks who are obese or morbidly obese, they have a large number of complications. So in my early years, like so many other people, we had a lot of complications. And over the 20 plus years I was there, we worked on our techniques to decrease our incidence of infection in that very vulnerable patient population. So that's sort of been the focus of my academic work.
Okay.
We definitely made some inroads in terms of being able to do these very large surgeries safely, preventing a lot of morbidity after surgery. And that is sort of continued on to my current work today. Not as much as in Pittsburgh, but that's, if you say, that's what I'm known for.
And this, I don't get into all of the medical terms, but you actually developed a technique, and I know it's referred to as the clamshell technique.
Yeah.
Now, this is not a medical podcast, so I don't want to get all into like at one of those conferences.
I'm not going to do the doctor thing on you, but it's a simple way of correcting crooked bones.
Gotcha.
Lots of different ways to fix crooked bones. This is a very straightforward way, which people who have basic orthopedic skills can execute and perform successfully.
Awesome stuff, man. So again, what I kind of hearing from what you've said thus far is, it's like the remind me of the Malcolm Gladwell book. I can't remember which one it was, but when he relates to how you become an expert at something, and is that you have opportunity to do it over and over and over and over. I think the book is about you need to do something 10,000 times to become an expert at it.
Yeah.
So clearly, in those 20 years in Mississippi and in dealing with traumatic bone injuries, you basically become an expert in that.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, just in terms of like the number of reps that we had, and then also the complexity of care, and then complexity of care in a patient population that's under-resourced. Just a lot of the things that you take for granted in DC or Pittsburgh. I definitely got a lot of experience doing that.
So now, obviously, as you know, this is a podcast for business owners. We call it a business empowerment podcast. So people might be wondering, why do I have Dr. George Russell on this podcast? We're going to talk about traumatic bone injuries for the rest of it, and the answer is no. And as I shared with you, George, and that's the name we're using on this podcast, not your nickname. We promised we weren't going to do that, but to tell a very quick story, as I already shared with you again. George has been a mentor of mine for literally since I met you. And it was a time when you came back to DC to visit, and you and I were at lunch, and we were having a conversation. I was talking about my business or what have you, and you and I was having a conversation, and you clicked into speaking about marketing and certain books and asked me certain questions. And I joked with you. I was like, "Who are you? Who are you?" And what had happened is you had shared with me before that, but what had happened was, when you were at the University of Mississippi, you had been offered the opportunity to be the chair of the orthopedic department.
Yes.
Now, George, can you tell us when that opportunity came to you, what was your response? Because I think one can learn so much from this.
Well, I'll just go backwards a little bit. So
Okay.
while I was there, I was doing some other light administrative work for the group, and I had an opportunity to go to Kellogg as part of an enrichment series. So the one of the
And that's Northwestern University.
Northwestern, the business school, Kellogg, and we had an opportunity to go to the business school and take weekend classes that specific for surgery, surgeons, that kind of stuff. And they were I went to one with the typical sort of doctor hubris, like we're so smart and they're not. And then immediately you learn that everybody in the room is smart, that they've chosen different paths in life.
Gotcha.
And then I went back to another one, and then I said, I'm sold on this. I really want to get an MBA. And I applied to Kellogg, and I applied to Kellogg for several reasons. One is I thought it was a phenomenal experience I had when I was there for those enrichment courses. It focused on, in terms of what I needed. It wasn't a big quant school. It was more of a management school. And important in business school is also who you go to class with. So if you want to talk a little bit about business school and sort of my opinions about where to go, we can certainly get into that. But opposite medical school or law school, it's very important who is sitting next to you when you go to business school. And so that's when I went to Kellogg. And then when I got out of Kellogg, they asked me if I wanted to be the chair. And then I accepted the chair position probably 3 months after I got out of Kellogg. But I didn't go to Kellogg auditioning for the chair job. It was for all those reasons people get picked to be chaired. I think it was a feather in the cap, which made it easier for them to offer me the job.
Appreciate the one thing that's been very consistent about you since I met you is your humility. But man, you don't got to be that humble on this podcast. I mean, you basically not basically. You became the first African American chair of the University of Mississippi.
So not at the university, but certainly in the orthopedic department.
In the orthopedic division, yes.
One of probably two or three or four in the time of the organization. But the first certainly of a surgical department.
That's right.
And of a subspecialty department, absolutely.
So did you feel any particular pressure about being, quote unquote, the first? Or simply being in that position at all?
Yeah, there's always a little pressure to do well. And there is a lot of pressure to, I would say, be an example for those who are around you, no matter what their backgrounds are. And that pressure doesn't let up during your time as the chair.
So tell me, what did you learn and in your experience in business school that helped you in your experience as the chair of the department?
Oh, so Kellogg was a phenomenal experience. So business school at a place like that, where I'll just describe, we would fly up I went the executive route. So the executive route at Kellogg is for people who have been in the business at least 10 years, have some sort of rank or something like that. And so I went there every other weekend and a couple of weeks in the summer for 2 years. And
wow.
Immediately what you learn is that it's about who you're working with. So the whole structure is designed so that you interact with the other students. And so, for example, there are no TVs in your rooms. There's only one TV in the hall. As soon as class is over on Friday, you walk right from class to happy hour. and then you just spend so much time together working. And so why does that matter? So in my group, I was the only physician, of course, but you work with a finance person, a marketing person, who become very close friends. And then if you expand that out to the other 70 plus people in the class, you make these phenomenal friendships and people who have from all walks of life and all different types of business. And that for me was so enlightening. And so when we were talking that day over lunch, it was basically just sharing all the fun stuff that I had learned from the people I was with. I mean, these were guys who, some of the guys had successful exits and they were just there for fun. And these were young guys, younger than me. There were some people who were CEOs of big companies, COOs, people who were about to be the CEO. And when you put those groups of people together, it's a phenomenally enriching experience, especially for someone like me who had no business experience, had never done a spreadsheet before I got there. And so they were very nice to bring me along. But I think that was it for me to sort of enlighten me about the world of business.
So how did you apply those lessons to the chair or the chairmanship?
The first book we got, so the first thing you talk about there is like manager versus leader, right? You spend a lot of time working on that. And then the first book we read, one of the early books we read, is called Do Nothing. And the title just takes you back. It's like, what are we doing here? And so it was one of my favorite professors at Kellogg. But the theme of the book is that you should be running your business well enough, or you're developing your people well enough so that you aren't doing anything. You are just helping eliminate obstacles, providing direction so that your business takes care of itself. And so he quotes several people, but one of the people I remember him quoting is that when the Chicago Bulls, right? You never saw Phil Jackson call a lot of timeouts when it got bad. His philosophy was, we have worked on this. I have the right people on the team. They are going to make this business run as it should. And so that's always been one of my favorite books. So one of my basic philosophies is building up people, and making sure that the bench is strong and empowering people to their abilities. The other probably influential book is Good to Great by Jim Collins. We just talk about some of the basics. And so what Jim Collins talked about in some basic business precepts, but in terms of leadership, you want to be a level 5 leader, which essentially says the same thing. You are there to develop people and put them in the right seats on the bus, is his analogy, so that the business takes care of itself. So as the chair or the CEO or whatever role it was that I was having at that time, that was sort of that has always been my philosophy.
All right, so tell me what, and I'm just going to stay with University of Mississippi. Tell me what was one of your greatest challenges that you encountered, and then how did you deal with it?
One of the great challenges in academic medicine, particularly at University of Mississippi, is garnering resources. So, the chair spends a lot of time working on resources, the things that compensation, call pay, the other thing that we often negotiated, like OR block time, all these different things that you're always sort of wrestling with. And the question is, for me, and I think going to business school helped a couple of different ways. One, you could speak the language with the business types. Like, the metrics for success are very different in what I do academically, professionally, than in business. So it helps you understand how the administrators are thinking about the issues and the problems that come up. The other thing, it also helps you understand at a higher level is to understand, I'll say, what the currency is on the campus. So each of these campuses has a different kind of currency to get things done. And the currency in Mississippi was goodwill. and trust. And so once you learn that, then you need to garner goodwill across the organization so that you can accomplish things. Because it wasn't about, not-for-profit, state-run academic society. It's not necessarily about margin. I mean, margin is a consideration, but it's not the primary driver oftentimes.
Gotcha.
So in business school, or going back and sort of thinking about it, it helped me figure out what the primary drivers were to be successful, and then to be able to work in that environment to just be successful.
So then you recently decided an opportunity came and you're now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so before I left Mississippi, I became CEO of the practice plan. So that's sort of the person in charge of the physician practices and advanced professionals practice. And that was the job I did for the past 2 years before I moved to Pittsburgh. And in that regard, the big thing that I had to do was create a new physician compensation plan. And
you got to pay your folks.
You can imagine, there are 18 different departments, 800 docs, plus I don't know how many PAs, to create and negotiate a compensation system which met the goals of the institution, but at the same time appropriately compensating the physicians and PAs or APPs. That took about 18 months to get that to going, and that was my primary task at that time. Then we had some other operational objectives that they wanted to accomplish. So then, why Pittsburgh, right? Why did I go?
Well, hold on, because we gonna get to Pittsburgh in a minute, because I didn't really realize it's 18 months.
Yeah, it was
because
2 years,
I'm
2 years out of CEO.
2 years,
plan. Yep.
And I know people. One of the things I know in business that I deal with is always consideration of how you compensate your employees.
Yep.
Right now, obviously, you're doing it on a way larger scale than most people who listen to anybody listening to this podcast. But can we kind of walk through that if we can? How did you? What were you balancing? Well, or what was the issues that you were balancing in order to arrive at a compensation plan for the entire, or the docs and the PAs, as you said?
Yeah. So the first issue was from the vice chancellor and dean, and they wanted a compensation model which encouraged productivity. In the corporate healthcare, productivity is what brings in money for revenue for the organization. And where it has changed over time is that there used to be a premium to be in academics, and insurance companies would pay you a premium, but that is eroding or being eroded away. So it's more important that even the not-for-profit state-owned academic medical centers really need to, focus on revenues, top-line revenues. The other issue, there were 18 different departments, clinical departments, that had 18 different compensation plans. Some rewarded productivity, some rewarded academic accomplishment, some rewarded just showing up. And so how do you marry those things, recognizing that academics is still important? How do you support research? How do you support admin time? And so it was the way we did it. We had a consultant who would come and just do the data with us, run the data, and then marry the objectives of the organization while getting all the physicians on it's not a strictly productivity driven comp model, but a largely productivity comp model where there are carve outs for academics, there are carve outs for research, but it's a general plan for the entire organization. So there's no misunderstanding what happens. So one of the things that would happen when you were the CEO of the practice plan is that when you're trying to predict your costs for the next year, like salary costs are 90% of what you do. But with 18 different comp plans, you couldn't figure out what the dollar amount was going to be year over year. And so you had no way of guessing. You had no way of, and basically it was only a guess about what your expenses would be. So with the current model, you're fairly accurately able to project your costs. And although the cost went up because physicians became more productive, the hospital business became busier, which helps offset the cost for the providers.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to say providers, for the physicians. Productivity increases.
See, that's very important, man. You're dealing with people's money right there. That's serious business.
It was a lot. So it required a lot of, dinners and meetings and just meeting with the other various chairs and other important stakeholders to get the points of view and then bring them together into a comp plan that just made sense. And I do feel very confident that we got to a comp model that makes sense. Now, of course, with any comp model, as times move on, it'll have to be modified, right? This will be on productivity. Once they get the productivity down, they may say they want to, take their foot off the gas a little bit and reward other things. But in today's times, you can't reward those other things unless you have large endowments or you have very good collections in which you just offset some of those collections for other important aspects of an academic medical center.
So now let's get to the land of the Steelers and the Penguins. And who else is?
I don't know about the Steelers yet, but I do have a healthy respect for the Steelers. They have a heck of an organization, and I've enjoyed being sort of close up to them. So why did I come to Pittsburgh? So, I had done the CEO position for a while, and I think the big win was the comp model. And there were just a friend of mine here, was having some challenges with one of his groups. And he said, George, would you come to sort of kick the tires as a consultant? And I said, well, of course, I'll come. And then as we talked, there are just a lot of opportunities here. So if you think about sort of the scale, I worked at a place that had 3 hospitals. Now this has 40 hospitals.
Wow.
And we have a lot of different physician groups, private, employed, academic, across a number of different facilities doing all the specialties. And the chair here is someone that I met when I was lecturing. He was a second-year resident, and I was lecturing to his group. So he's someone I've known for years, and he just got this job a couple of years ago. It's a huge job. And as we talked, I had done enough orthopedics. I felt comfortable I could, do something else. And so as we talked, he was looking for someone who had some experiences, but who could serve as a number 2 or a number 3 in the department while he was making his run. And so that's what I did. I've got some other system roles, meaning that, a role that is responsible for some of the output of the 40 different hospitals, or the ones that do hip fractures. So it's an increase for me, but more importantly, it's to support the department and support the chair to get where he can go. So one of the things I've learned in this new chapter, or learning or perfecting, is how to be a good follower again. And one of the things, when you've been the boss, you recognize what a good follower is. And so I model for him and for my other peers on my level what a good follower looks like. So, what are the simple things that you do, right? I go to a meeting with an agenda.
Okay.
I have problems, but I have solutions for my problems. And then you make a recommendation and let the chair decide, because the chair has a lot of privileged information that the rest of us just won't have. And so it's been good. It's a lot of learning again for me, which I find very exciting.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so I'm going to get back to the University of Pittsburgh.
Yep.
In a minute, but I have to talk about your experience. Speaking about having insight that other people may not have. I mean, again, we graduated from the same university. We're both very proud of. But you've served a role as board of a trustee member. So I'm an alum, you're a trustee member. So you clearly have insight that I don't, and most of us who graduated from Denison do not have. I want to talk to you, about what you see as the role of liberal arts um, education as it relates to business owners, leadership, um, in your experience.
This is an amazing topic. So one of the things that so the liberal arts education in our time was just learn a bunch of stuff and then be enriched for the world and see if you can apply it some kind of way. The focus now is very different at Denison. I'll just speak to Denison because one, we both love it, and two, I have a little more insight into it. So Denison, probably 7 or 8 years ago, pivoted and said, we need to ensure that the kids, as Adam, the president, will say, blast up like a rocket ship when they leave this place. So they have begun a focus on what happens when you leave college, not contrary to a liberal arts education, but consistent with.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple of things they've done. They have some certificate courses. They have I forget where we used to go for like internships, but it's a formalized Knowlton Center, which has had some endowment money to really focus on getting kids. I mean, you went to one of the seminars there.
Yep.
And they've also changed the majors. So there was a major, if you just say, for example, global commerce, which is focusing the kids in a very academic way, but bringing in a lot of the different pieces of business. It could be some finance, it could be writing, etc., to make, sort of enrich kids. So, but to answer your question specifically, if a liberal arts education, you come to the table with a broad understanding of writing skills and communication skills that you might not get if you're just in a class with other like-minded people doing math all day. And I think that that really, really matters. And when I look at the results for the kids that go to Denison and how they're, really being able to be placed in phenomenal opportunities and then being recognized at their jobs because there's just something different. There's something different in how these kids interact. Mm-hmm. And that for me is, I think that is well worth the investment of the time and resources for a liberal arts education. And even I went to medical school, but at least I knew how to write a paper. So
That's
when
right.
I started my academic career, I could write a paper. I could have civil conversations. I could learn we could disagree civilly. All those different things that you just have that happen at a liberal arts college, or the life skills that you'll need to be successful.
That's right. Yeah, I guess as you were talking about disagreeing civilly, because we had those smaller classrooms, and there was a lot of interaction with the professor and each other, and sharing our whatever our points of views may be.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of took that for granted, I guess, because one might say that in today's current climate, that's lacking. Yeah, I was up on campus a couple of years ago. I think it's called a Red Frame Lab.
Yeah.
And it's an entrepreneurship lab. So the students in this particular. I guess they call it. It's called a entrepreneurship lab. So the students all have their particular business interest that they are a product that they create, and then they have to, I guess, present it to as alum that come back in like and the alum kind of chooses based on the presentations which one to select. And I remember being so impressed by some of all of the students actually in this Red Frame Lab, but kind of chuckling to myself like, who are these people? Like, that's when we start like dating ourselves about how old we are. But just being so amazed by some of these young people, and then obviously reflecting upon ourselves, thinking, I would never been able to do that. Like I wouldn't even, I can tell you what I was thinking about when I was like a sophomore or junior at Denison, and it definitely was not, creating a clothing company that's, and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the school, and obviously it's not just unique to Denison, but being way more practical and more life skills or to these students beyond just the academia. And it's in an environment that allows that to foster, and allows that to grow, like a school, like a school like Denison.
Yeah, absolutely. It allows there's a certain amount of rigor to it, of course, but it allows the kids to try. It allows them to fail, and like they say, fail fast, get back on, try again. All the things that you'll encounter once you get outside of the cocoon of college.
So let's talk about. You just mentioned something, and a term that I use, and I've used quite often, and I actually heard it for the first time when I was at at Denison for the Red Frame Lab. And you just use it. I think it's funny. You talk about fail fast, because one of the presenters talked about when he was asked the question of what things he learned as an entrepreneur, and he talked about how he learned to fail fast, right? And I think that that is something that business owners, we fail, right? It's inevitable. Everything we're going to do, every idea that we have is not going to work out the way we intended to work out. Some things don't work out at all. But it's like learning. I guess you learn when to move on to something else. Sometimes we stay in something too long. Do you have like a lesson where you, how do I put this? You either should have employed the fail fast, or you did employ the fail fast philosophy?
So I think there are a couple of parts to this. So the first part of it is the first part of fail fast is the willingness to take risk. Right? You got to be vulnerable in this if you want to lead and lead people and fail fast. So there are a number of examples of that in my professional life. One would be like, not to make it too clinical, but we're going to round on the weekends, for example, right? Like, when you have residents, it's very easy to let highly qualified residents round, but we have a duty, so we are going to round. So and it might not work. I mean, it might be too much fatigue or something like that on the faculty, but that's sort of an example of like trying new things. Things where I've held on too long. Yeah, I think there are, if I think about certain business cases, there were things where I probably could have exited earlier with a better result. The challenge always is these business decisions oftentimes involve individuals. In the business world, you understand what it is, right? In the academic medicine world, it's very different. There's a different set of implicit agreements about how we come to work and how long we stay at work and what's acceptable behavior. But definitely things I should have done more quickly.
All right. So, I always look at my clock, and I promise you I wouldn't keep you too long. So we are at that point now. My man, how's the golf game these days, man?
Raggedy. So
that's what you always say, though.
It's always true.
All right. So this is what I like. If it's 3 lessons that you are like my audience to take from you, what would they be?
I think a couple of things. So one is you can't put a price on showing up and starting on time. I mean, to me, that is key. And that makes up for a lot of other, I'm going to say deficits, but inequalities, right? So there are some people who are really, really smart and they may do really, really well, but people recognize when you show up and start on time over and over again. Treat all people with humility, particularly without question. And one of the things we talk about here is never forget the privilege that we have to be in these roles. Because it is indeed a privilege to be in these roles. And I guess the corollary to that is always prepare to get lucky. Like, all of us get someplace, but there are a lot of other qualified people, but you got to be prepared to get lucky. And I think that's been true for me, for ever since we met back in
87. 1987.
I've just sort of gotten lucky along the way.
Yeah.
I do my best to prepare myself for the luck that may come along.
You can always prepare yourself to be lucky. So now I'm going to actually, because you just reminded me of a question I would hate myself if I didn't ask you if we ended this podcast. You said that in your new role, you're kind of working, or you're working with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, I don't directly work with them. The practice covers them.
The practice covering.
Yeah.
And obviously they are, one of they're the cream of the crop when it comes to professional organizations in sports.
Yep.
And often, I guess, in business. Is there anything that you have seen, learned, that you would like to share about, or about how they do what they do and why they are who they are?
So, the chairman, Mac Hogan, is a sort of an exemplary performer in this, and it's the relationships, right? How do you manage the relationships? And these are not transactional relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's people trusting you and feeling comfortable enough with you so that they will answer the phone when you call. Or they feel comfortable enough. I think the next part of it is feel comfortable asking you for a favor without a quid pro quo. And that is what I have observed as that is the thing, right? It's the relationships. And this is it's a very serious industry and a very serious business. And, the Steelers are beloved in Pittsburgh, across the globe, apparently. Look at the number of terrible towels all over the planet. But I think that's the essence. How do you maintain relationships? And then, of course, on what we do, how to provide the highest quality care and access on the clinical side.
Okay, awesome. All right, Dr. George V. Russell.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. I would love to do it again after
did a good
years.
job.
I have more to say about Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. All right, good man. I appreciate you. All right, we will talk soon.
All right, my brother. Be well.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. Remember, information is only as good as its application. So apply these insights and strategies and start making transformational changes to your business and life today. If you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and YouTube. Keep kicking ass and taking names.